Let's go back in time, way back to the year 1005. For 25 long years, two of China's most powerful empires, the Song and the Liao, have been locked in a brutal war. And now, finally, it's over. There's peace. But a huge question is hanging in the air. For over 1,000 years, people have argued about this. Was the famous Treaty of Chanyuan a brilliant strategic move, or was it a total embarrassment? So today, we're going to dig into the real story behind this incredible agreement. All right, let's start right at the moment the war ended. The Song Emperor, Zhenzong, is actually on the front lines. He's just signed the treaty, and he has to know, what do his own officials really think about it? Now, the emperor was pretty smart about this. Instead of asking them directly, he kind of tested the waters. He suggested a quiet, somber return to the capital city. But at the same time, he sent a messenger to a famous scholar named Du Gao to get his real opinion. And Du Gao's reply was shocking. He said, "This is a great victory. We have to celebrate." And when the other officials heard this, they all agreed. The emperor must have been so relieved. His team saw the treaty as a win. But that debate was really just beginning. Okay, so to really get what this treaty was all about, we've got to bust a couple of big myths that have shaped its reputation for centuries. So, the first myth is that this was a treaty under the city walls. Now, what does that phrase even mean? Well, it's basically a nice way of saying you surrendered. It's an agreement you're forced to sign because the enemy has you surrounded, and you've got no other choice. But was that really what was happening here? No, not at all. Actually, if you look at the facts, the invading Liao army was in a really tough spot. They were deep inside Song territory, and their main commander had just been killed in battle. The Song army, on the other hand, was strong, and the emperor himself was there leading them. So the Song actually had the advantage. They had the power to choose, keep fighting or negotiate. This was a position of strength, not weakness. Okay, on to myth number 2. This one is all about the money. You see, the Song agreed to make annual payments called suibi. Now, to a lot of people, that sounds like tribute, right? Like a payment a weaker country has to make to a stronger one. But was it really tribute?
Well, the secret is all in the wording. The language they used in the treaty was incredibly careful. It wasn't called tribute at all. It was called assistance for military expenses. Kind of like helping out a neighbor. And the silk they sent was just described as local products. Plus, the Song only had to deliver it to the border, not all the way to the layout capital. All this careful language sent a very clear message. We are equals. This is a deal between two powerful empires.
And this, for me, is where the story gets really fascinating. This is where we stop thinking like soldiers for a minute and start thinking like accountants. 300,000. If there's one number people remember from this treaty, it's that one. That's the amount of silver and silk the Song agreed to pay the Liao every single year. It sounds like a huge amount of money, a massive price to pay for peace. But let's put that number into perspective. So that number, which sounds so huge, was actually a tiny drop in the bucket for the Song government. It was less than half of 1% of their total annual income. Financially, it was a very, very small cost. So why was paying this small amount such a brilliant deal? Because the alternative, war, was so much more expensive. Before the treaty, the Song were spending over $15 million every year just to defend their border. By paying $300,000 for peace, they were saving millions and millions. From a purely financial point of view, it was an incredible bargain. And if you think that's good, wait, it gets even better. Because peace opened up trade between the two empires. And guess what? The Song actually earned more than 300,000 yuan each year from this new trade. So the peace actually paid for itself. That annual payment was essentially free. You see, this whole new way of thinking, using money and numbers as a tool, was the real innovation here. This was the genius of the Treaty of Chanyuan. It created a completely new way for empires to deal with each other. Think about it. The old way was usually just a one-time payment to make an enemy army go away. It's a short-term fix, and it often feels humiliating, which can lead to more fighting later. But this treaty created a system of annual payments. This wasn't just a quick fix. It was an investment in a long-term relationship. Now, both sides had a good reason to keep the peace year after year. It's almost like they created a subscription for peace, and the system was brilliant.
It gave the Song a new way to influence the Liao. It created powerful allies inside the Liao government who now depended on that money and wanted peace to continue. And the system was flexible. Decades later, instead of starting a new war, the two sides just sat down and renegotiated the price. This was a new kind of diplomacy, managed with a balance sheet instead of an army. So this brings us to our last big idea here, this whole new rational way of making peace. It also asks us to think differently about the leader who made it all happen, Emperor Zhenzong. You know, a lot of history books have called Emperor Zhenzong weak or cowardly for choosing peace instead of a risky, glorious battle. But you have to remember his job. His generals, they were focused on winning the next battle. The emperor had to worry about everything else: the economy, the safety of his people, even political threats from his own powerful generals. He had to see the entire picture, and that meant being very, very careful. It's easy to get excited about stories of brave warriors and epic victories, right? There's a famous poem that praises a hero for wanting to fight on. But another poem asks a really powerful question. It asks, if that hero had fought on, how many living souls would have been turned to ash? It forces us to remember the terrible human cost of war. And in the end, that's the bottom line, isn't it? The Treaty of Chanyuan wasn't a flashy victory on the battlefield, but it gave both empires something much more valuable: 120 years of peace. And that long peace allowed the Song dynasty to flourish. It led to one of the greatest golden ages of culture, art, and science in its entire history.
So, the Treaty of Chanyuan leaves us with this big question. What really matters more in the long run? It suggests that sometimes the greatest and most civilized choice isn't to win a war, but to find a smart, rational way to avoid one in the first place. Thank you for joining us for this explainer.